Kamala Harris and Tim Walz urging their supporters to keep up the fight on a call with grassroots organizers yesterday.
I know this is an uncertain time. I'm clear-eyed about that. I know you're clear-eyed about it. And it feels heavy. And I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th.
3 weeks after losing the election, Harris's team is speaking out for the first time. In a wide-ranging interview with Pod Save America's Dan Pfeiffer, former senior advisor to Barack Obama, 4 senior members of the Harris campaign discussed what they think went wrong. One major hurdle, they say, they only had 107 days, and they say that impacted decisions like the number of interviews she could do. Trump, on the other hand, of course, made it part of his campaign to appear across several popular podcasts.
One of the things I like about doing a show like this, can you imagine Kamala doing this show?
I could imagine her doing this show.
She'd be laying on the floor.
She was supposed to do it, and she might still do it, and I hope she does.
She's not going to do it.
I will talk to her like a human being. I would try to have a conversation with her.
If she did this kind of an interview with you, I hope she does, because it would be a mess. She'd be laying on the floor comatose. You'd be saying, call in the medics.
Harris's team addressed whether she should have gone on Joe Rogan's podcast and tried to explain why it never happened.
Yeah, there's a lot of intrigue around this, a lot of theories. It's pretty simple. We wanted to do it. We had discussions with Joe Rogan's team. They were great. They wanted us to come on. We wanted to come on. We tried to get a date to make it work, and ultimately we just weren't able to find a date. But it, didn't ultimately impact the outcome one way or the other.
They say they just couldn't find a date there, and that they don't think it would have impacted the outcome one way or the other. James Carville weighed in on this question in recent days. Let's watch what he had to say.
The vice president was thinking about going on Joe Rogan's show, and a lot of the younger progressive staffers pitched a hissy fit. If I were running a 2028 campaign and I had some little snot-nosed 23-year-old saying, I'm going to resign if you don't do this, not only would I fire that on the spot, I would find out who hired them and fire that person on the spot. I'm really not interested in your uninformed, stupid opinion as to whether you go on Joe Rogan or not.
Okay, so Jaime, you have the unfortunate position as being for the person who has to explain and answer for all of this for us today. What did go wrong?
Yeah. Look, I hate these postmortems, and Mike and I have been talking about this, and this is going to go on for weeks and weeks and weeks. There were a myriad of things that happened over the course of the last 4 years, and even 8 years, that led to what happened on November 5th. Look, 2 things that stand out to me. I think my friends on the Kamala campaign are correct. 107 days is not enough time to run for president. That's just a fact. And on the other side, Donald Trump has now run 3 times. This is the 3rd Democratic nominee that he's run against. And so Donald Trump has run for president 3 times. And so he's been able to seed his messaging a lot more strongly than any of our candidates have been, because we've switched over each of the 3 times. And so I do believe that Vice President Harris ran a tremendous campaign, and I think she was as good of a candidate as she could have been. Now, granted, let's pull back to the layers a little bit. Should she have done Joe Rogan? Yes, she should have. Would it have changed the election? Probably not. And so I think, and look, I'm going to steal something that Mike and I were talking about in Mario during the green room. I think here's the overarching thing. You've got to meet voters where they are. You can't try to lead them to where you want them to go. And I think time and time again, Democrats, and particularly this past campaign, we were trying to lead a high-minded campaign and talk about issues that we thought were important to people, but come to find out, that's not what people wanted to talk about. People wanted to talk about immigration. They wanted to feel safe. They wanted to talk about inflation. And look, all these numbers that, these indicators that we're talking about today seem to be doing better right now. And I think if we had a couple more days or weeks, I do believe Kamala Harris and Joe Biden could have got that message out a little bit more saliently. And then, of course, Governor Walz did a great job, too.
And just to Jaime's point, I mean, there's a couple of things, right? We talked about immigration earlier in this segment. We saw Governor Abbott. He was arguably the unsung hero of this political campaign, right, by bringing immigration to the fore. When you look at Donald Trump's, what he's arguing is a mandate for a second term based off of the margin of victory that he had over Vice President Harris. I mean, you look at some of those blue states, that's what's emboldening him. And that's also the warning sign, I think, for the Democrats, right, because it is immigration, it is inflation. She was quite defensive, as was Biden. When Hyman mentioned some of the indicators, right? President Biden, before Harris assumed the mantle, would just come out and talk about all of these statistics from the Economic Council, excuse me, et cetera. And Americans aren't feeling that when they go to the grocery store and pay for eggs and bread and all of those other things. And Vice President Harris, I think the campaign fell a little bit short of understanding and being able to articulate Americans' pain.
Yeah, so let's dig in a little bit more on Stephen in particular there. Of course, we've spent a lot of time on, and it was an ad that was framed around trans issues, right? That the Trump campaign put a lot of money behind, and it was, Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you. Here was how Quentin Fulks, who was on the campaign, as well as David Plouffe, explained that in this postmortem. Let's watch.
Obviously, it was a very effective ad at the end. I ultimately don't believe that it was about the issue of trans. I think that it made her seem out of touch. And it was sort of a pseudo-economic ad underneath it.
At the end of the day, we were spending a lot of time with voters in these battleground states, both quantitatively and quantitatively. And this trans ad was not driving vote.
So he says the ad's not driving votes, but when you listen to what Quentin said there, I'm sure that they were testing the trans issue in a straightforward way. But if the ad's about way more than that, it doesn't necessarily line up.
Right, and it's amazing how after an election, it's like one or two things that, oh, we lost because of that. But go back to the Virginia governor's race in 2021. The issues in that race were inflation, trans kids in sports, and immigration, even in Virginia, was an issue. That completely prefigured this election. And I think because the Democrats did better than everyone thought they would in the midterm elections, that people kind of forgot that. But I think
and that's why we ended up with a 170-day campaign, by the way.
Right, but I think the election was probably lost 3 years ago when the White House was saying inflation was transitory when everyone knew it wasn't, and they were saying there wasn't a border crisis when there was.
Do you agree?
I mean, oh yeah, I agree. I also think there were parental issues in that gubernatorial race in 2021. I mean, it was a. Let me put it to you that there's so many places I could go with this, but let me just put it in this context. When you have the they them was the important line in that ad. It had less to do with the transgender issue and more with the they them, the wokeness. When you juxtapose Vice President Harris and Beyonce against Donald Trump at either McDonald's or wearing an orange vest in a garbage truck, that was the difference in the election. It had everything to do with the economy, but it also had to do with who is speaking directly to the voters. And you had Donald Trump doing what Democrats have done for decades, speaking directly to working class voters. And the Harris campaign either ignored them, didn't think they needed them. I don't know what their idea was there, but they made a vibe election bet. He made a base election, unvoted, low propensity voter bet, and he won.
For sure. All right. Stephen Collinson, Mario Parker, Hyman Moore, Mike Dubke, thank you all very much for joining me this morning. I appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving.